you are speaking or intend to speak, maybe turn your cameras off as well, because that's going to help us with our reception. Thank you very much indeed for that. So I'm Steve Barnett. I'm the chairman of the Trust, and it's my pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to you all, to thank you for joining us this afternoon at our virtual 2020-21 annual members meeting. And I think it's fair to say that it's been a year a bit like no other, really, as we've responded to the pandemic, which has had a profound impact on all of us. And yet, even against a backdrop of unprecedented challenges for the NHS, including, of course, the QEH, the Trust has made many important forward steps in the past 12 months as we continue on our important journey of improvement. And we've learned a great deal from our collective experiences over the last year. There's no doubt at all about that. And many improvements have been made for the benefit of our patients and their families as a result of that. And we're incredibly proud of how Team QEH has pulled together and remained absolutely focused in the most challenging of circumstances on delivering safe and compassionate care. And we're also extremely grateful to our partners and our external stakeholders, and of course our fantastic local community for their unwavering support for QEH during the pandemic, including those who've contributed to fundraising activities to support further improvements for our patients and for our staff experience. If you're having any technical issues, by the way, in dialing in, you can contact our communications team via email on communications@qehkl.nhs.uk. I'll just repeat that for you. So any technical issues, you can contact our communications team via email on communications@qehkl.nhs.uk. So could we have the agenda on the screen, please? Thank you. So this afternoon, you're going to hear from a range of colleagues about our successes and the progress that we've made over the past 12 months, including, of course, our response and our learning from the pandemic. And you're also going to hear about our main challenges that we still face and how we're responding to these, as well as an update on the work we're doing now to modernise our estate and bring a new hospital to King's Lynn and West Norfolk in the future. But I want, first of all, just to touch briefly on some of the work of our Governor and Council activity. You can have the next slide, please. And as part of just clearing out some of the administrative issues that we have as part of our annual members meeting, I want, of course, first of all, to approve the minutes from our previous annual members meeting. Could I ask board colleagues, please, if they are content for us to approve the minutes of the previous annual members meeting? We are indeed. Thank you very much. Next slide then, please. There should be a slide headed Governor's Report, if we could have that on screen. Thank you. Hopefully everyone can see this. I don't intend to read out everything on all of these slides, but I want first of all to pay handsome tribute to all of our governors for the work that they do. They're such a vital part of the work that we do within the Trust. They are the connectivity between the Trust board, staff across the organisation, patients and our local communities, and they give so freely of their time and their dedication. And on behalf of the Board of Directors, I want to say a huge thank you to all of them. And they do a whole range of important work. They work in the local community, and they continue to work very closely to a whole range of community groups, and also contributed importantly to the work in our vaccination centres. They've also been involved in healthcare and awareness events, and increasingly they've played a part in improving the communications between the Trust and the governors and the Governors' Council in particular. Next slide, please. And they provided, as I was indicating, some really valuable support to the Trust during the year. For example, they've taken up observer roles on the Trust board committees for the first time. And they have a range of important council committees which help us in running the organisation and help us to ensure that our governance systems are absolutely spot on. For example, the Business Committee, Patient Experience Committee, Membership and Communications, and our Nomination and Remuneration Committee, which approves important appointments to the post of chairman and other non-executive director vacancies. Next slide, please. And just continuing with this brief report in terms of Foundation Trust membership, in August 2021, we had further governor elections. We had 6 governor vacancies created, and it's a very warm welcome to Barry Hunt, Sarah Shaw, and Leanne Kendrick as new appointees. Next slide, please. Last slide here. There we go. And the governor election process starts again in December 2021, and you'll see here below that we have a range of vacancies which need to be filled, and we look forward to welcoming everybody to be in place by February 2022. To become an FT member, or for information on the nomination or voting process to be governor, please contact the Foundation Trust Office via sarah.rennick@qehkl.nhs.uk. That's sarah.rennick@qehkl.nhs.uk. And I couldn't really conclude my short section without mentioning our wonderful army of volunteers. We've missed them immensely during the pandemic, and we're so thrilled that we're beginning now to welcome them back into the QEH. We have 85 volunteers who've returned to the hospital and are helping us in various ways, as you'll see listed there. And we're looking forward now to welcoming them back on a phased approach in the coming months. And we're absolutely delighted that once again, we're going to have them by our sides, supporting our patients and supporting the services that we offer. So that's a very quick introduction from myself. And at this point, I want to hand over to our excellent Chief Executive, Caroline Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to start to say thank you to the Chairman, to our Board of Directors, particularly our non-exec directors, to our governors, to our members, and to our volunteers for your support, your help, your hard work in enabling us to deliver what we have delivered in the last 12 months. I think it's also important to recognise this is probably one of the most difficult 12 months in the history of the NHS. And I just want to pause on reflection as a huge thank you to our staff, every single member of our staff, from our domestics to our senior consultants, for your dedication, your motivation and your support. I don't think any of us could have realised the effect of COVID and what we would have to do differently and how we responded. And I just want to say thank you. I equally would like to thank our community for your support in the last 12 months, and also to recognise that many of us have lost loved ones from COVID. So in the recognition of that, it is tremendously important just for us to pause and think about that. It's been a year like no other year, as the Chairman has said, and we are still on our ambition to absolutely become the best rural district general hospital for patient and staff experience. And as we go through the slides of the last 12 months, I think you will see our determination, our motivation, and the changes that have happened for our hospital, for our patients and for our staff. And if we move on to the next slide, I'd just like to describe some of our highlights very quickly. So we've had 1,867 patients recruited into trials. We've delivered over 1,955 babies. We have over 12,780 volunteers hours given, and we've delivered over 77,000 vaccination jabs for COVID. And I think first and foremost, we've continued to see improvements in every area, with the biggest improvements in safety culture, safe environment and health and wellbeing of our staff, and the development of the staff engagement programme. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, we haven't got a patient story today because our patient is a little unwell and apologised at the last moment. So moving on to a review of 2021, myself and our finance director, Chris Benham, are going to take you through the highlights of what we've achieved. Thank you. Next slide. In the context of having to deliver services differently and manage the demand of COVID, we've had challenges in regarding to achieve the 95% ED standard, and we can see that we did improve from 1920 to 81.82%, and again I think this is fantastic in light of what I've just mentioned. We have improved in some areas on our wait for ambulances, but again this has been hugely challenging in the last few months with demand. I'm delighted to say that we've achieved 5 of the national cancer targets, and we are consistently working to improve future service and service delivery. And again, we all know that we've had huge challenges in the last 12 months with the RTT National Challenge, because through a period of time we cancelled all non-urgent elective operations. Next slide, please. If we look at our quality and the improvements, this has been first and foremost one of our key objectives here at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and I'm absolutely delighted to say that we have seen through an unannounced inspection last year some really positive improvements around medicine, surgery, emergency care, maternity and diagnostics, and we're now rated good for caring. We will talk later on about our duty of candour for COVID patients and the lessons we have learned and how we've communicated and improved our services for our patients in the future. And I am taking on, or have taken on, the lead for restoration of our recovery programme right across the Norfolk and Waveney system. Next slide, please. Again, this is just a slide what we can glance at very quickly and just really demonstrates the 2020 CQC ratings compared to 2019 and the improvements particularly around the caring domain. Next slide, please. Again, one of our key objectives has been around engagement. We all know as an organisation that an engaged workforce provides better patient care and better clinical outcomes, and I'm pleased to say that we can see some really firm improvements. The 12th most improved staff survey in 2020 and one of the most improved trusts in the East of England Medical Engagement Survey. We've still got lots of work to do in regard to engagement and valuing our staff and people feeling part of one team, but this is exceptional progress in the backdrop of a really difficult year. Next slide, please. Healthy lives. Again, it's really important for us as a hospital to improve lives of our patients, but also equally of our staff. I'm pleased to say that we've developed a really robust health and wellbeing programme, which includes our own staff supporting mental health first aiders and clinical psychologists, and introducing new specialist roles around post-traumatic stress disorder. I've already mentioned the COVID vaccinations, which has been fantastic. And again, we did have the best flu vaccination rates in the East of England last year, where 100% of our staff were vaccinated. I've already mentioned research, and again, I would just want to say this is absolutely fantastic for a small district general hospital to actually be recorded and ranked as 27th out of 507 trusts for COVID-related research. Thank you. Next slide. I will now hand over to my Finance Director, who will talk us through our financial status.
Thank you, Caroline, and good afternoon, everybody. Chris Benham, Director of Finance. And it gives me great pleasure to confirm to members that we were able to deliver our financial plan last year, a real massive achievement given the operational pressures that Caroline identified through managing the COVID pandemic. It's a very small surplus, but it's a surplus, and you can see the next two bullet points describe that we received just under £270 million worth of income, and we spent just under £270 million to generate that small surplus. You can see from that slide that the majority of our income, just under 85%, comes from clinical income and relates to the delivery of the patient care. And likewise, in terms of our expenditure, just under 70% of our expenditure is spent on staff costs delivering that care, with about 14% on clinical supplies and drug costs. More importantly, we were still able to deliver an efficiency programme. We were one of the very few trusts in the UK to deliver an efficiency programme, and we did that through grip and control around our workforce, particularly reducing reliance on our temporary and agency workforce. Next slide, please. In terms of what did we invest in, we had actually a really exciting year despite the COVID pandemic. We were able, with support from national colleagues, national funding, to buy the Sandringham Hospital. That's really given us a great deal of flexibility in terms of our elective work, and will be extremely useful, if not critical, for our elective recovery programme as part of the response to COVID, and that has enabled us to open up 26 additional surgical beds. We've also, through charitable funds, as the chairman mentioned, extreme gratitude to our charities and also the donations into the charity, opened in May of this year a new cancer wellbeing and support centre, and we've also managed to complete the same-day emergency care unit, which offers a fantastic service within that emergency care pathway. And we've also made some improvements to our discharge lounge, so if patients are waiting to be discharged out of the hospital. We've also managed to start our journey about improving our digital offering within the hospital, and we've got some really strong plans that we set in train last year. And we also must remember and thank our League of Friends charity connected to the trust that have funded our radiology information system. Finally, in terms of the trust, we ended the year with a healthy cash balance, and we continue to work to improve payments to our suppliers, but we really try and focus on our small and local suppliers in terms of making sure that cash flow to them happens in a very timely way. In terms of charity, clearly we're very grateful and continue to remain grateful to both staff and donors for charitable funds. Our overall level of funds has dropped slightly compared to last year, but we've actually spent those funds on some really exciting things, including the Health and Wellbeing Centre that was referenced earlier. We also have spent significant amounts on supporting staff through training conferences, but also staff welfare, and also some elements to improve our patient stay, particularly around Christmas time, but also trying to keep baby scans, etc., going through the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. And I think, Chairman, I hand over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chris and Caroline, for those opening presentations. And I'm delighted now to call on Alice Webster, our Chief Nurse, and Karen McGuire, our Deputy Chief Nurse, who are going to outline some of our reflections, our responses and learning from COVID-19. Alice.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. I should apologise to start off with to say that for the majority of the pandemic I wasn't here. However, having arrived in May, I've quickly speeded up, and knowing colleagues as I do now, I am absolutely convinced that they have provided compassionate care throughout. I think for all of us, in all of our lengthy careers, and mine is probably longer than others, the scale of the pandemic was something we never planned or were able to say we could have achieved. But actually reflecting back on the year, it has been phenomenal. It was an unprecedented challenge. It was a huge period of change, and I think significantly, as has been spoken about before, we know that from March in 2020, when we received the first confirmed case and admitted, the teams have worked hard, but the impact has been felt by our communities, by our patients, their relatives, their loved ones, and all of our staff who are in the main, all of those above categories. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Karen, who will go through the next few slides, and then I will close. So over to you, Karen.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. The next few slides are really just a synopsis of what, as others have described, has been a phenomenal, unprecedented demand on services, personally and professionally. So in terms of how we responded to the pandemic, we very quickly established some extraordinary governance structures within the organisation and set up specific meeting formats. We also had to make some significant changes across the organisation to the bed base, and we had to zone the hospital and individual departments in order to safely manage patients that we considered may be or were actually at risk, and those patients that were COVID positive or probable positives. And that happened right across the organisation, in our intensive care unit, in our ED department. And at 2 points during waves 1 and 2, we actually ran 2 emergency departments. We also established a number of practical changes around the site, so cough screens, and obviously we socially distanced and took trolleys and chairs and moved appropriately in line with national guidance. Our flows and discharges demonstrated the health service and external partners' response to our internal demands, and complex discharges became much more simple. And we had the, as Caroline spoke about, the drop in elective activity, which allowed us to work much more effectively and efficiently. Next slide, please. Throughout the pandemic, we continue and still continue to communicate widely with not only our patients but our staff, and we did an awful lot of listening and answering questions and trying to allay fears, and there was a huge amount of fears across the organisation, and that was in terms of questions and PPE. We embarked on a huge staff training programme and redeployed staff into new roles in order to meet the demands, and we learnt from colleagues in other departments and shared that across the organisation, implementing new roles such as safety officers and logists and swabbing teams. And our infection prevention and control was obviously a pivotal part of the overall process, with lots of different procedures and processes and collaboration put in place. And we offered enhanced PPE and support to our Black, Asian and minority staff with the additional risk factors that carries. Next slide, please. As already spoken about, we have embarked as an organisation in listing into every national research programme that is taking place in the country, and we are leading many trials for this, certainly within the Eastern region. And there was an absolute hunger for information and sharing across the organisation, and that still remains really prevalent. Excuse me. We unfortunately had to suspend visiting at one part during the pandemic in line with national guidance, and some of you, if not all of you, will be aware that we have had to again suspend relative and patient visiting. But that just highlighted the importance to us of the exceptions, and there are some exceptions to visiting around compassionate and special needs for patients, but more importantly, the absolute need for communication. And we learnt lots through COVID and included and have brought online several new roles within the organisation to meet that demand, to ensure that all of our patients, families and relatives receive contact at least daily. And we've embraced technology and invested in iPads and iPhones in order to support and facilitate that communication. We also enhanced our bereavement support because sadly we did lose a number of patients, and we became patients' loved ones during some really difficult times, and we then had to follow that up with some detailed bereavement information packs, which we introduced. And we also introduced some follow-up calls at 7 to 10 days for those people that did lose during the pandemic. Next slide, please. And staff support was vital throughout COVID and remains in place. We responded by putting in place very regular communications and regular briefings led from the executive team. We supported our staff with things like wobble rooms that remain in place. We introduced additional changing facilities, and we introduced psychological support in addition to a few other things that are also in place. And the Black and Asian Minority Ethnic Forum was set up also as a response to what we were hearing from our staff. There were lots of new ways of working that were introduced during the pandemic, which we are really keen to hold on to, and we have held on to many of those. And we embraced technology. As I said before, meetings via Teams, such as today, was introduced as a direct result of the pandemic. And our overall recovery and returning to some degree of normality has demonstrated that stepping things up is often much harder than standing things down, and making sure that that's happening safely. We've used the learning and some of the processes that we put in place during the waves, the peaks of the waves, using our technology to ensure that we have continued to move things forward and started to recover to the best of our ability. We've also used the independent sector to ensure that we maintained vital cancer surgery, urgent surgery, and for those very long waiters. Next slide.
So finally, we undertook a duty of candour exercise from April of this year, where we contacted patients, their loved ones and relatives, next of kin, around anyone who had contracted COVID-19 whilst in our care. And that was a personal contact from a clinically led team. Often the nurses that had been involved in the patient's care were the ones that spoke to them or their relative. And that has enabled us to really look at how we have learnt from the pandemic, what we have learnt, and what the impact of the care that we deliver is. And I think it has been absolutely phenomenal to talk to staff, to talk to individuals who've been engaged in the programme, to understand the impact of this pandemic on them as individuals, but also, as we talked about earlier, the wider community. We are in the process of pulling together a short report that will be available, and that's really important to us to look at what learning we've had. As Karen has alluded to, in much of that, it's been around how we deliver services, and often it's not been around the service, but the way in which the service has been delivered to that individual that has made the biggest impact. So we will be happy to share that once it has been through the relevant processes, and we have looked at that with some of our governors. So I guess on behalf of us all, we just want to thank the community, but also thank those people who have helped us tremendously in support over the last 12 months, but specifically in institutive candor exercise and really making a difference. The biggest thing that we have got as we move forward is that we need to have those conversations much earlier. We need to make sure communication is tighter and stronger, and that people feel part of their care or their loved one's care, even if they can't be in the building. Thank you. Next slide.
Thank you very much indeed, Karen and Alice. I think it's really important that time is taken to look back on a previous year and to understand the pressures that our staff have been working under, to recognise the improvements that they've all been responsible for making, but also I think to properly recognise and understand the anxieties, the tensions, the suffering that patients and our families have endured through this awful, awful pandemic. But what's also important, I think, is that we learn lessons, and we learn lessons to make sure that we continue to improve the way that we provide services to our patients, support our staff, and also the families and the communities that we serve. And taking forward that learning into recognising that the next 12 months has even more challenging priorities for us. And this is where now we want to move our short story and ask our Chief Executive again, just to talk to you about some of the priorities that we see in the upcoming year. Caroline.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, it's year 2 of our corporate strategy, and just to remind our members and our governors and our own board, it's a really simple strategy: Q for quality, E for engagement, H for healthy lives. And we absolutely want to focus on year 2 of the strategy to improve our services, first and foremost the quality of care and the safety of our patients. We are absolutely ambitious for our organisation, and as I've said earlier, we really want to be the best district general hospital for both patients and staff. So what are we going to focus on this year regarding quality? We eagerly anticipate a visit from the CQC regulators to enable us to move out of special measures. The chart I showed with you from last year was a full inspection, but it wasn't an inspection to rate us out of special measures. We know we are afforded one soon, and we are already awaiting and think we can demonstrate the changes in regard to quality and safety in what we've introduced. We also want to make sure we're an absolute learning organisation, and first and foremost we focus on our patient experience, and that we absolutely do learn from complaints, and we do learn from when we haven't got it right and how to improve our services for our patients. And we have already seen in Q1 of this new financial year some splendid indication that things are improving in the right direction, though we have much more to do on patient experience. The other thing I think which is really, really important is around recovery and restoration. As I mentioned earlier, we are leading the way in regard to restoration, but I just want to remind members of the public and our members and our governors today, a huge challenge against the backdrop that we are still living with COVID and the demand for our emergency services. And again, to support the learning and the development from Shrewsbury and Telford Trust in regard to the improvements in maternity services. Next slide, please. In regard to engagement, again, I'm so proud of the work that we have done. Lastly, last year, we appointed a head of culture and a head of staff engagement, and that's proved so worthwhile in developing our culture and transformation programme, but also in ensuring that our staff feel listened to and involved. Our ambition this year in the National Staff Survey is to have an even higher response rate, but first and foremost is also to learn from the responses and what we've got to do differently. And we absolutely do want to become an exemplar in equality and diversity and inclusion for our staff when we look at our workforce, and the quality but also the diversity. We wish to embrace that and take that forward in developing our services and improving our patient care. And of course, in line with many organisations, we want to focus on mandatory training and appraisal rates and reducing staff absences. Next slide, please. Healthy Lives, again, we've got a fantastic programme in the flexible approach of developing and introducing the flu vaccination this year, working with system partners, particularly around base place care and the development of population health management, and really looking at patient pathways which are simpler for patients and families and which are navigated through the need for service and service integration. And we are also working to a smoke-free site and absolutely ensuring that we learn from any death which happens within the organisation. And I think it's true to say that we can become an exemplary site in improving the support and advice we give to our cancer patients in light of our new cancer centre. So some really clear priorities with really simple, focused objectives to enable us to deliver our ambition of being one of the best in the country. Next slide, please. Of course, a big part of this work and a big part of this focus from myself and our executive team is really working on the case for a new hospital, but also maintaining safety. There's been a lot of information which we have shared with our community and with our local press in where we are with our RAC summary. In particularly, people do know that we have a dedicated team of surveyors and technicians to monitor and carry out emergency repairs to make sure our hospital is safe. And at the moment, we are going through our assessments, and we currently have 210 supports in place and props supporting our ceilings and our roofs. And we have absolutely embraced a focus of making sure that we maintain the hospital safe, both for our patients and our staff. It's been a significantly challenging in the past 12 months, having to close the gym and our critical care because we've had operational issues and challenges with the roof, but I'm pleased to say we've managed that. And we've also planned evacuation responses and tested the worst case scenarios. So a heap of work happening on making sure that we are focused on safety and on making sure that we implement the RAC programme. Next slide, please. Following national advice, we have prioritised our roof plank surveys. We've completed 95% of the visual services, and we're now on the remaining 5%. Absolutely, what is important is to continue with this work and this rolling programme. Next slide, please. What we have enabled through this work and through working with regional colleagues and the local ICS is we have been fortunate to receive 20.6 million emergency capital funding for a programme over 3 years. This is to give us the ability to create decamp facilities for our wards and theatres to allow installation of fail-safes, and absolutely to make sure that we manage the risk and remove the RAC planks or mitigate the issues. At the same time, this is a real opportunity to introduce some more service improvements and to actually enable us to do things differently for our patients and our staff experience. And I'm pleased to say that the board has approved this business case and work has already commenced throughout the organisation. Obviously, what's really important for us is not just current safety, not just the interim programme of works, but actually having a robust case for a new hospital. We have a compelling case and we have responded to the expressions of interest and will submit a case for a new hospital at the required date in September. And what we are focusing on is actually been a very serious contender for one of the other rate schemes, the national funding, to deliver a new hospital by 2030. We are working on our strongest case to be part of this exercise. We were allocated 500,000 bioregulators last year to help us progress with this case, and I'm pleased to say that in board today we approved the expressions of interest for a new build and also for potentially a part modular build. But what we're aiming for as a trust board and as an executive team is a brand new hospital. Next slide, please. So I shall finish there, and just to comment on, I'm delighted to work with such a group of ambitious staff at the Trust, and we aim to deliver our mission. We also aim to deliver a new hospital at the Queen Elizabeth.
Thank you very much indeed, Caroline. I would only add that, of course, taking forward all of these priorities, we're doing it at a time of some fairly major upheaval within the NHS and big changes to the way that care is going to be planned and delivered in the future as we embrace the implications of the government's longer term plans for integrating health and social care. And in Norfolk and Waveney, a lot of that work is going to be through a new integrated care system, which will take on statutory footing from April 2022, and we are very active participants in all of that. It will seek a greater collaboration between the three acute trusts in Norfolk and Waveney via a hospital services strategy programme. And in line with national guidance, we will be developing an acute provider collaborative to ensure that we are making best use of public monies, that we're offering consistent high standards of care and the most rewarding experience for our staff that we are able to bring. And as part of the move towards integrated health and social care, we're going to see the development of a range of place-based integrated care systems. And we are going to be ensuring that, as well as playing a full and leading role in developing place-based integrated care for the Kings Lynn and West Norfolk area, we will be contributing similarly for the patients that we serve in South Lincolnshire and North East Cambridgeshire, particularly around the Wisbech area. And as part of this greater collaborative approach, we are now agreeing a range of capital investment across Norfolk and Waveney. And two recent examples are a business case for a new set of diagnostic assessment centres and an electronic patient record. So we have our own challenges to deal with, but those challenges have to be within the context of this greater approach to system-based integration to offer the very best and the most straightforward range of health and social care services to the patients and communities that we are serving. So that's been a quick resume of the past 12 months and also an articulation of what we think are our priorities and challenges in the 12 months to come. And now we have an opportunity to have some engagement on questions and answers, and Caroline and her executive team, as well as some of my non-executive director colleagues, stand ready to take on board some of your observations and some of your questions. Now, I'll be looking for some support from our comms team here to make sure that we're handling this effectively, but I understand that we have a couple of questions which have already been submitted. I think that is the case. And Chris Bishop, I think from the EDP, has the first question to put to us. Chris, are you there online?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I am. Sorry, I wasn't expecting to be called in live.
I do apologise.
Caught me out there, sir.
A very warm welcome to you, Chris, and thank you very much indeed to you and your colleagues at the EDP for all the support you've given us over the past 12 months. It's very, very much appreciated. Chris, your question.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask where we are now exactly in the process of putting this bid in for a new hospital, and also if I could ask the board candidly how confident they are that we're going to get one. Thank
you very much indeed. Very pertinent, topical question. I'm going to call in Laura Scaife-Knight, who's our Deputy Chief Executive, and Chris Benham, our Finance Director, to have first dibs a response to that question.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. Chris, thanks for joining us this afternoon and thanks for your question. Firstly, a big thank you to our local community and to local media, including the EDP, for your fantastic support and for getting behind the campaign to bring a much needed new hospital to Kings Lynn and West Norfolk. As Caroline described earlier, we are on track to submit our expressions of interest to the Department of Health and Social Care on Thursday of this week in a bid to become one of the further 8 new hospital schemes. We are putting forward our strongest possible application, and that has full support from our system partners across Norfolk and Waveney, Lincolnshire and Cambridgeshire, our key external stakeholders and our regional colleagues. And our clear preference is to secure funding for a full new hospital for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. In parallel with the process in relation to the expression of interest, we are progressing with the development of a strategic outline case. The next phase of that work, Chris, if we look between September and November of this year, is to explore and assess a full long list of options. That includes on-site options and off-site options ahead of proposing a preferred way forward and solution to the board at the end of the year. In terms of next steps for the expressions of interest, we are expecting a long list to be announced in autumn of this year, and the final 8 new hospital schemes to be announced in spring of next year.
Thank you, Laura. Chris, do you want to add anything?
Not from me. I think it was a really comprehensive and detailed position statement on the strategic outline case as well as the expressions of interest. So nothing more to add. Thank you, Chairman.
In terms of your second point, how confident are we? What we can be confident of is that we have put together the strongest possible submission based on patient grounds relating to the growth of patient demand on our services, in relation to supporting the government's approach to having integrated care, and in terms of best value for money for this particular area of the country and the kind of premises that the best standards of care can be delivered from. We have no doubt whatsoever that our case is robust and overwhelming, and we've gone to great lengths, supported by your own organisation, Chris, to ensure that we've got full partner and stakeholder support in putting that case forward. It's not based on emotions. It's based on the facts of a hospital which is degrading quite quickly, well beyond its life expectancy, and knowing that we want to provide the best possible care for the patients that we serve, and we want to be able to do that in premises which are fit for purpose. We've lobbied and we've put our case in front of all the right people, and we await now a positive response. So our confidence is based on the robustness of our business case. It's now up to decision makers to determine whether that's a strong enough business case to be included in this next round of new hospitals. I have some people now who are appearing. Ms. Alexandra.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, and thank you for all the work that you are doing. And in the case for the new hospital, as a hospital that's leading the way with COVID-related research and the duty of candour, it's certainly a shining example. But we've heard that there are that hospitals are being asked to limit their ask to 400 million. Now, as we need 700 million for a proper hospital, can you assure us that we would be asking for a proper full rebuild, the rebuild we need? And also, with the modular rebuild, how soon, if we do get the money, could we actually see parts of the hospital built so we can start using them, so that we wouldn't have to wait for 5-10 years, sometime never? We could actually start and build them and move into them. And thirdly, you've said about something fit for purpose. And fit for purpose, of course, means built to last. So would the modular build include, for example, building of bricks and mortar with proper tiled roofs, something that won't fall down in the next 30 years?
Thank you very much indeed for your questions. In response to the question about the value of the bid, yes, indeed, we are applying for the full amount for the cost of a brand new hospital. In terms of your second and third questions, your third is a technical one, and I will ask colleagues to come in and deal with that. But Laura, do you want to pick up Ms. Alexandra's second point?
So in terms of timescales, Councillor Kemp, it is tricky to pin that down precisely because beyond the process of the strategic outline case, we will then get into hopefully beyond approval, an outline business case and a full business case, and of course it is entirely dependent on approvals to pin down the timescales for when various phases of a new hospital, whether it be a full new hospital or a multi-phase redevelopment, and the 2 or 3 phases that may come with that may start. But indicatively, it could be between the region of 2026 up to 2033. However, it is worth describing the government have, of course, committed to eradicating RAC hospitals by 2035. One of the many unique factors of the Queen Elizabeth's business case and compelling case, including a feature of the expressions of interest, is of course we have a deadline of 2030 based on the expert view of the end of life of this hospital.
Thank you very much, Lauren. I should point out, if I'm omitting people's surnames, I can only see your Christian name on my screen, so apologies for that. Now, let me turn to Paul Cullen, who's one of our governors and one of our most eminent surgeons. Paul, over to you.
Hi, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, so obviously it's a bit of a surgical slant, Chair. I agree with everything that's been said, and I think everybody should be commended on the work that's been done in the last year. However, as you know, from a surgical point of view, we've built up quite a backlog of patients, both local and obviously across our whole community. And also it remains challenging meeting the cancer targets in terms of surgery. Now, as you know, we've recently purchased the Sandringham Hospital, which is fantastic news, but we remain in the main hospital with 7 theatres, which is the same number of theatres we had 27 years ago when I joined. I'm mindful that there are some theatres and therefore some potential extra capacity in the Sandringham. And I'm not sure whether this is a staff recruitment issue or what, but I would just like to flag it up. Clearly, it will provide a bit of capacity for us, which we desperately need from the surgical point of view. And I fully get that the emphasis has been on COVID, but there is a surgical aspect to this trust as well. So I thought I would avail of the opportunity.
Thank you very much for your question. I'm going to bring in Sarah Jones, who is the Deputy Chief Operating Officer. Sarah.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Steve. So, yeah, Paul, you're absolutely right. It is a staffing and recruitment issue. The surgical team are working on recruiting to their vacant posts, and we will hopefully be able to get some activity running through the Sandringham theatres fairly soon. We are using the smaller theatre, as you probably know, and we're trying to make best use of that. And we are also doing some work in day surgery to make sure that we pull out anything that really doesn't need to be done in a day surgery theatre, so we get the right cases in the right place. So I'm thinking about scopes and that kind of activity. So there are 2 things going on there. And as you know, we have a restoration and recovery programme for planned care, which is one of the work streams within that is very much focused on theatre efficiency. So we will be trying to make sure that we drive efficiencies through theatre and we make best use of all of the capacity that we have at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Caroline, did you want to comment on this question?
Yeah, I do. First and foremost, to Paul and our surgical colleagues, I just want to absolutely reassure you that it is a top priority, elective recovery. No one should wait the length of time they have to wait for some of the operations right across the country in the UK, not just in Norfolk and the Queen Elizabeth. We are also, just to assure you, looking at our effectiveness and efficiencies internally and what we can do more of and differently, but also as a region looking at how we can collectively work together and use the capacity in the best interest of our patients. And finally, putting some big bids into the region and to the department in regard to capital for future service delivery. At the same time, what we've got to be minded about is actually workforce and workforce strategy and development plans, because if we do start building new theatres across the patch, we've got to look at how we're going to staff those theatres and the workforce to deliver. But I just want to reassure you, Paul, it's an inherent passion of mine to get us back onto recovery so our patients aren't waiting.
Thank you very much indeed. And I may have omitted to answer Councillor Kemp's third point about modular build, use of modern materials in the bid that we put together. Chris, do you want to just deal with that point before we take the next question?
Yeah, certainly, and thank you for the question. I think it's probably fair to say that modern methods of construction are very different now to how modular or porta cabin builds were a few years ago. So part of the bid, part of the construction of any form of building will make sure that we do have sufficient life, so that it's not a very short-term fix. As I think Laura said, you know, we have to have a long-term solution here for the QEH, and anything that is within sort of a 10 to 15 year lifespan isn't going to do the job. So modern methods of construction are different, and there's some synergies that we have to gain by learning from other rebuild hospitals, but that's just making best use of the UK pound. But in terms of life of the hospital, it will have to be, you know, in excess of 20, 30, 40 years.
Thank you very much, Chris. Can I move now to Peter B?
Hello, it's Peter Brown. Some of you may know me. Could I just ask a question about recruitment, please?
Peter, we can't hear you very well. Could you turn your volume up a little bit, please?
Yeah, we'll try that. Is that any better?
Yes, that's okay now. Thank you.
Yeah, good. It's deafening me, but you can hear me. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a question about recruitment, picking up on that theme. For a number of years now, it seems to be difficult to recruit into senior posts at the Trust, particularly consultants in certain specialisms. Does the Trust feel it's making any traction in its recruitment programmes, or is it still an issue?
Well, let me bring in Joe Humphreys, our Director of People, first of all, to deal with the general point, and then Frankie Swords, our Medical Director, to deal with your point about consultants. Joe, are you online?
I am. Thank you very much, Chair. And yes, you know, when I joined the Trust here in March, and since I joined, I've heard a lot of it's difficult to recruit in Norfolk, and yes, it does remain difficult to recruit in Norfolk. However, that also makes us even more passionate about growing our own. And we've got a very, very exciting agenda to build on the career development of people who are joining the Trust. We're really excited about the new nursing school that's going to be coming into the region, which will be in the new year. And that will really kind of like bring in people at those entry-level careers that we can then help develop and grow into our more senior positions going forward. So if you can't buy it, you have to build it, is our policy. But yes, Frankie might give you some more information specifically on consultants, but I hope that helps.
Thank you, Joe. Frankie.
Thank you. And yes, you're absolutely right, Peter. This has been really quite an interesting journey for us over the last couple of years. And I think a few things have made a big difference. One is the development of the corporate strategy, so people understand what QEH is about, what we're good at, that we have a passion and vision and drive. The other is the recruitment campaign, which was national, and you'll recall seeing it on Cambridge Station and the side of buses, and our swapping packed trains to country lanes and so forth. So I think that really did make a difference as well. But the other thing in terms of medical staff is the engagement. And I think the engagement with our medical staff has really transformed over the last couple of years, as evidenced by really, really good outcome from our GMC survey. And if our trainees enjoy their experience here and learn a lot, they want to stay. And if they see their consultant colleagues are happy and engaged, and we're far from perfect, but we have now got one of the highest medical engagement scores in the country, because our doctors are hungry and they really are passionate about improving our hospital, and it's paying off because we've recruited some brilliant people in the last year. There's still pockets of really difficult specialties where there's a national shortage, but equally there are some areas where we've made fantastic recruits. I'm thinking of a few cases where established consultants from London have chosen to leave their teaching hospital in London to join us at QE because they're excited to join an exciting team. So actually it is getting better.
Excellent news, Frankie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frankie, and thank you, Mr. Brown, for your question. Now, I still have two hands up here, Paul Cullen and Caroline Shaw. Are they legacy hands, or do you want to ask a further question?
Sorry, is my hand still up? It is.
It is.
Well, while I have the moment, just to totally agree with Frankie, I think that what she said is true. That actually, you know, if the doctors who come here and the trainees get a good experience, they will come back. Yeah. I would add that actually, if we were to get the new hospital ticked over the line, it would be a massive statement going forward in terms of, you know, the future proofing it, because it just gets confidence in people. But I agree also with Frankie, we have recruited some very, very strong candidates over the last year or so. So it is encouraging and it is possible to recruit. Sorry, my hand was still up. I'll take it down.
Thank you, Paul. Caroline.
I was just going to ask Alice, our Chief Nurse Chairman, just to pick up on nurse recruitment, because that's been an absolute sterling story.
So thank you. You are absolutely right, Caroline. We have recruited both locally and nationally and internationally, and we have got a really low
I can't
vacancy.
hear you, Alice. It may be that you've got. Do you have two monitors on in your room?
I have. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
We can hear you now.
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I've just bashed the other monitor. I think that's very technical. So thank you. Just to say that, Caroline, you're absolutely right. Nurse recruitment has been hugely popular, and we are a destination of choice. We've had a large number of local individuals come forward, and indeed the School of Nursing Health Studies is a real attraction moving forward to grow our own. We've also got a number of people who are choosing to come and work here nationally and internationally. We are recruiting and continue to, with a very, very strong international recruitment programme. And indeed, we are up for a Nursing Times Award, a national award for our programme. But we also know that actually when we look at the vacancy rate, many organisations are sitting with vacancy rates of between 15 and 25%. Our vacancy rate for our registered nurses is below 10%. So that shows that people are wanting to both come and work here, but are more importantly staying. So there's been a really positive story around nurse recruitment, and we're working on our allied health professional recruitment as well, so that we can get a much more rounded picture. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Alice. Right, I'm looking for further questions. Can't see any just for now. If you do have a question, please tick your hand up function, and then you'll pop up.
I've muted.
Who's this, please?
You're more important.
Who's this, please?
No, you're more important. Coming from me.
Is this Malcolm P? No, we've lost you. Again, just looking to my comms colleagues, I can't see any questions on my screen, but can you see if we have any more?
Thank you, Chairman. No, we can't see any more at this time.
In which case, on this beautiful late summer's evening, with chilled Charbly and barbecues calling all of us, I'll draw this annual members meeting to a close. If you want to email any communications to us, you have details on the screen there. If you want to access our annual reporting accounts or our quality account, then you can access them through the address on the slide there. So it just remains for me to, first of all, thank all of you for attending today. It's been a delight to have you and to be able to talk to you about the past year, but also the year to come. And I'd like to finish with a few thank yous. I'd like to say a big thank you to Caroline and the executive team, to my brilliant non-executive director colleagues, to our governors, all our wonderful staff, of course, and our volunteers, our army of volunteers, and our variety of partners in the community and our charitable donors. And I have to say, a personal message from me, I have been so proud to be the chairman of this trust and to see the dedication and the passion and the commitment from all of those groups that I've just mentioned. It's been a real pleasure to see everyone come together in such a community spirit through such difficult and challenging times. And I very much hope we can count on your continuing support over the next year or two. But for now, thank you very much indeed. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.